Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hapanwo TV. Hope you're all doing well. Slightly different lighting effects again. I'm not using my tripod. I'm using like a couple of boxes instead to try and cut out some of the light reflected off the floor, so it's slightly softer hopefully, because I think there's been a bit too much glare in some of the videos I've been making lately. It's so let me know if it makes any difference. Anyway, for you, I mean. Today I'm going to do another film review. This is another non-roving film review, as you'll be familiar with by now. And again, this is one that I don't know if it was shown in any big screens. It certainly wasn't on general release. I suppose it's a bit of a B movie. It's got no famous people in it, no famous names. But it's one that I've been talking about for a while, and I've been telling you for quite a while I'm going to review it. And it's called, of course, The Mandela Effect. It's a feature film about the Mandela Effect, hence the title. It's directed by somebody called David Guy Levy, who I've not heard of before. He's not a director I'm familiar with. I looked at his filmography, and yet he's not sort of in the Hollywood big league. He tends to do smaller scale productions, more modest outfits and things like that, which, of course, that's not a criticism at all. I mean, look at the state of Hollywood today. Look how awful it is in many ways. So I don't hold that against him at all. I'm curious to see this film, although I know it's going to be a bit of an ordeal, because I know for a fact, I mean, this is revealed in the trailer, that it includes the plot element of a child dying, and that's going to upset me because I'm a father. I've got a child, although the child in the film is about 8 years old. Mine is 25, but she's still my child, and I'm still her dad, and it really makes no difference. So I know I'm going to find that very harrowing. So I'm not really looking forward to that part of the story. But it is what it is, as they say. So I'll let you know what that's like. As always, when I review films, I approach them with a completely clear mind. I don't read any reviews or any spoilers, and I avoid spoilers as much as I can. I don't look at anything except the trailer. I know this is something that other people don't do, and it baffles me. I know people say, well, I was going to go and see that film, but it's had a lousy review. And I thought, you're going to let these damn critics make your mind up for you? Go and see it for yourself. Make your own mind up. It's like that. I don't do that. I don't read reviews or anything like that until after the film's come out. When I've watched the film, actually, I'll do my own little brief review. Then I'll go into what some of the other critics have been saying about it. So that'll be sorted out. Now, I'm curious to see this because, of course, it's called the Mandela Effect because it is about the Mandela Effect, and I have mentioned the Mandela Effect before, especially in my videos about CERN, the Large Hadron Collider. This is something quite recent, actually. In fact, it dates back to about 2010, maybe just a little bit later. I can't remember exactly. But it was published. There was material published by Fiona Broome, who's an investigator into these sort of things. Is that people kept coming to her. This happened in 2013. Nelson Mandela died, the famous South African political activist and former president of the country. He died, and she started hearing from people who said, and this is when it really became serious, because she was hearing from people saying, I don't know what's going on here, because I remember Nelson Mandela dying in 1986 in prison. And I remember it so well. I remember seeing the newspaper headlines, I remember hearing the reports of all the BBC specials and things like that about him. And I don't understand why now. It's really weird, but I remember it so well. And that must be a very strange experience, to have that, to see something happening in the world which your memory tells you didn't happen. It must be very, very strange indeed. And Fiona Broome was started collecting more and more of these sorts of stories. For example, that this actually affects me. That the Looney Tunes cartoon series was called Looney Tunes. So it was actually Toons, T-O-O-N-S. Now, I'm one of these people. I distinctly remember as a little small child, watching the Looney Tunes. The Looney Tunes are very, very well-known cartoons like Roadrunner, Bugs Bunny. The kids love them, you know, and I did when I was a kid. I still enjoy them now. I remember actually, I've been about 4 years old, and asking my mum. I think I asked my mum. I said to her, "Why is it Looney Tunes? What do tunes mean?" And she said, "Oh, that's just how it's called tunes. It's actually tunes, but Americans pronounce the word tunes, which they do. And it's also the last part of cartoons, so it's kind of a pun. If you have an American accent, it's kind of a pun. Looney Tunes, cartoons, tunes is a kind of a pun. And indeed, there was a series that came much later, actually, after I grew up, called Tiny Toons, which is based on the Looney Tunes tunes. But I remember it so clearly that when I watched the TV in the TV series Bottom, the comedy with Rick Mayall and Adrian Edmondson, in one of the scenes, Mayall's character Richie describes Eddie, the Edmondson's character, as a bald-headed Looney Tune, and I remember thinking, Looney Tune, it's not tunes, it's tunes. And when I realised, when I found out, when I looked, I said, what is it? I checked, and it said Looney Tunes. I thought, oh, they must have changed it. They must have changed it at some point, because this series ran for 30 years, from 1939 to 69, and they must have, over that 30-year period, they must have rebranded and changed and rebranded it, and changed it to tunes. So I went and checked on Wikipedia, and guess what? It's always been Looney Tunes. And honestly, I was gobsmacked. I was like, what? That doesn't make sense. I remember having this conversation with my mum. And then, of course, there's other examples. There's the Berenstain Bears. Now, I don't know what they are, but there's lots of other examples of, you know, if you just Google Mandela effects, there's about over 100 now. Different ones, and the Looney Tunes thing is something that just affects me, but other people have many others. Now, of course, I actually debated this with a skeptic. It was a good-natured debate, actually. It was on something called Be Reasonable, which is a skeptic radio show produced by the Merseyside Skeptics. And Marsh, the host, was asking me about this, and he brought up the subject of conflation, and he said, "Look, the Mandela effect is simply what you'd expect when you have conflation. Conflation is a natural error of memory. Your memory is not perfect, and certainly, especially over a long period of time, errors start occurring. Your imagination starts filling in the gaps and things like that. It's processed within your brain, and it starts filling in the gaps. Now, the thing about it is, yes, I'm well aware there's conflation. In fact, if you watch a film you've not seen for 20 years, it will be very different to how you remember it. You'll think, oh, I don't remember it that way. And oh, that's happened to me. That's normal, that's conflation. What you get with the Mandela effect, though, is you get many people all over the world conflating the same thing. I didn't know, I mean, the whole Looney Tunes thing, I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what it meant. Until I realised other people were having this experience, millions, and I checked and I said, yeah, I'm the same. So it seems odd that so many people would conflate the same things. I mean, it's unlikely that so many people, for example, would, because there's a large number of people who remember Mandela dying in 1986. Which of course he didn't. I don't remember. I remember him coming out of prison. I remember watching him come out of prison and doing his little speech and becoming the president and things like that. And then he died, and there was a big funeral, and everyone was, all the world leaders went there because you know how deified that guy is. Oh, he doesn't deserve it, by the way, but that's another story. But the point is that I certainly, if I had memories of that not happening, of Mandela dying in 1986, I'd have thought, what's going on? It just doesn't make sense. I thought something weird is going on here. And then, of course, I could say, well, I'll just put it down to my own overactive imagination, or maybe it was a dream I had, because dreams can be very realistic and very detailed. And then I thought, but then you suddenly realise other people around the world are seeing the same thing, they're having the same thing, and you've got to ask yourself, is it statistically possible that so many, or is it statistically credible? Because if you get into statistics, then nothing is physically possible Nothing that is physically possible can be saying, well, that's too unlikely, that can never happen. I go into this in my skeptic video where I talk about the coincidence theory and the excuses they use when skeptics bring up the coincidence card. But you know, there comes to a reasonable point. There has to be a cut-off point where you say, hang on, that's too unlikely. Something more must be going on here. Interestingly, that in the controversy over the US presidential election, which I'll cover in a future video, a lot of them are doing the same thing. They're dismissing some of the circumstantial evidence that Giuliani and Powell have brought up as coincidence. But again, like I say, the skeptics never address this. Where's the cut-off point? Where's the statistical ceiling above which you will stop playing that joker? And that's my more general criticism of the skeptic movement, but that's very much what happens. So the question is, what causes it? Now, some people have claimed because of the timing that this is something to do with the Large Hadron Collider. In fact, that's what I speculated in my videos on this subject, that perhaps what that machine is doing to the fabric of space-time is causing this. It's causing essentially different universes to blend, because you see, there's more than one universe, and in other universes different things happen. So for example, it could be that in another universe Looney Tunes was Looney Tunes, and I remember that because I'm actually sharing memories with another version of myself in a parallel universe, which wouldn't normally happen because the gap between these parallel universes would be like a solid wall. What the LHC has done is made little holes in the wall. It's taken a few bricks out, and information is exchanging between the two, and that could be what's causing the Mandela effect. There's been several other explanations suggested, which frankly make a lot more sense than the skeptic line. Oh, it's just a coincidence, it's just conflation. But anyway, this is a drama, a science fiction, or whatever it is, drama about this effect and what happens. So I'm very keen to watch it. So as usual, I'm going to take my little virtual walk through virtual Oxford and go to the virtual cinema, because real ones are off limits at the moment, of course. And I'm not going to put my virtual mask on when I'm watching it. I'll do what Alan Partridge does, and I'll just go like that. Anyway, I'll see you when I come out of my virtual cinema. Okay. So I've watched the film, and I must say that was quite something. That was quite mind-blowing. That was a mind-blowing film. You know, I mean, that kind of state where I'm still not sure what to make of it. You know, kind of like, it is one of those films. Some films I can like start analysing straight away. Others, there's almost like a shock effect. And I think this is one of those films. I've made some notes. I probably won't go through them all, but I don't think I can avoid spoilers. But if you're like me, you know, you watch a film before you've seen the reviews, and that includes the review I'm going to give you now. It's a story about a couple and their child. The couple are Brendan and Claire, and they have a little girl called Sam, who's about 8 years old. Presumably that's short for Samantha, I'm not sure. And he's a games designer. He designs computer games, so he can code and everything like that, and which comes in very handy during the course of this particular film. And then, as I knew was going to happen, and as I've said, there is a tragedy, and of course it's the ultimate tragedy, which is they lose their child, which is the worst thing imaginable, I think. Certainly I think it's the worst thing that could ever happen to me as a father, and if you've got kids you'll know what I mean. There's nothing worse than that. It's interesting that there's all kinds of little clues in this film. I don't think I probably didn't spot them all, you know. Now the girl, well, they're at the seaside just sunbathing, and she goes over to the sea. She ends up drowning in the sea, which is the tragedy that we're referring to. and she picks up a seashell and starts looking at it. Now I know there's some kind of Mandela effect associated with seashells. I did Google it, but I couldn't find it. But you know, you the viewer can enlighten me in the comments section if you know what I'm talking about. But there are lots of other little little things in there. I mean, there's a whole list of like Mandela effects, or references to various popular Mandela effects in the film. So, for example, there's a little bit of a flashback, like he recalls his relationship with his daughter, his short but very loving relationship with his daughter Brendan, the main character. And for example, he's sitting and reading a book, and it's the Berenstain Bears, and you can see very clearly the cover's held up, and you can see Berenstain Bears, indicating something's going on here. Anyway, they go to the funeral, and then they come back, and Claire, she says to her husband, she says, it doesn't feel real, I don't feel real. And then, as they're sort of going through her stuff in her room, her bedroom, which Brendan doesn't want touched, he wants to just leave as it is, they come across the Berenstain Bears, and he says, what? That's a bit weird. And then he calls his best friend Matt, who's also his brother-in-law, Claire's sister, and says, hey, do you remember, do you remember reading those books when we were kids, the Berenstain Bears, was it Berenstain? Yeah, he says it's Berenstain Bears, they were Jewish, weren't they? And he says, look at this, and he shows him the book. My goodness, says Matt, it was Berenstain all along. That's weird, I'm sure I remember it's Berenstain. That, of course, is my experience with the Looney Tunes. And it's not long, actually. There's other things, like in his own life, like he sees a photograph that he remembers taking of his family, or having taken of his family, him, Claire, and little Sam, and he says, oh, it's taken in one place. He remembers it being taken in one place, but the photograph shows a different place. And then he starts getting into the Mandela effect on online. He does what you'd expect. He starts researching the Mandela effect. Also, he studies scientists who talk about parallel universes, and one of them becomes an important key figure in the story. And his wife thinks he's going nuts. I mean, Claire, it's almost like they have these kind of Mulder and Scully like conversations, where she says, you know, Brenton, you need to get some help. You know, this is really crazy. I'm getting disturbed about how you keep going on about this. I've been talking to Matt, and he's worried, and Matt's her brother, of course. And then he says to her, do you remember Monopoly? You played Monopoly. Do you remember the monocle on the guy's face, the little Monopoly man? And she says, of course, everyone remembers the guy with the monocle. And he says, go and get the Monopoly set from that cupboard over there. She says, where's the monocle? You see, and that's a kind of standard thing you get with it. If you're ever with someone and they're doubting you, if you're talking about the Mandela effect and they're doubting you, and they're thinking, well, what are you talking about? Just ask them one of those things. Do you remember watching those cartoons when we were kids? Bugs Bunny, the Roadrunner, Daffy Duck, and all those others, Porky Pig, you know, those classic cartoon characters. Do you remember what it was called? And I'll say, yeah, it was Looney Tunes. And this is just after they've been saying, this little Mandela effect's nonsense. They said, go and find out what it's actually called. And he'll like get his phone out and start Googling. Looney Tunes, oh my goodness. He says, there you are. There's your Mandela effect. Now, then Brendan starts looking into the simulation theory of reality. And this is something that's very interesting indeed. It's not a new idea. It goes back, it's very ancient, in fact. If you go back to ancient Hinduism, for example, virtually up to the beginning of the historical period, people, especially in India, were talking about this. Philosophers were examining this possibility that everything is somehow not real. It's some kind of projection, some kind of creation, an illusion, in other words. And in India, the classic word in Sanskrit is samsara. Samsara is the illusion, and to become, and this is where Buddhism comes in, because the goal of the Buddha, the Buddha, that is Prince Gautama, who becomes the Buddha, is to escape that, and the story of the Buddha is about that. It's about how he becomes to be the Buddha means to be enlightened, where you escape this samsara. And of course that's very similar. There's other plots as well. There's lots of metaphorical, there's films where it's kind of metaphorical, like The Matrix or The Truman Show, which is about people trapped in a false physical world who manage to escape into the real world. It's not literally like a universal principle, it's just kind of like, it's just a metaphor. For example, in The Matrix, of course, it's a science fiction story about people being forced to live inside a virtual reality simulation which is attached directly to their brains. In The Truman Show, it's about a man who's trapped in a very extreme reality TV show. That's a very good film, that is. It's less well known than The Matrix, but it's really good. It's a Peter Weir film. And he's a good director, actually. He's got Jim Carrey stars in it. It's very good. And so, in fact, there's another film I recommend. It's called What the Bleep Do We Know, if you've not seen it. That's a documentary. But it goes into this because, you see, what modern science is doing is it's in a sense confirming a lot of these ideas that go back to the ancient world by, for example, examining matter down to the very quantum level, that is the subatomic level. When you get to the subatomic level, you'll find the very laws of physics are different. You get things like superpositioning, quantum entanglement, things like that. And the observer effect, which is very, very strange indeed. You actually this shouldn't happen in classical physics, but you know about the wave-particle duality, like subatomic particles are both waves and a particle, and when you do the double slit experiment, which has been done many times, you find that sometimes it's a wave and it goes through both slits at the same time, sometimes it's a particle that goes through one slit and the other, but you don't know. What's really weird is that if you're looking at it, it becomes a particle, and if you're not, it's a wave. It's like the particle knows whether someone's looking at it or not. What's even weirder is it seems to know in advance. So this is weird. This is something that should not be possible. This is backwards time travel. Backwards time travel should be impossible, according to the laws of physics. There's all kinds of laws of physics that cannot mean that backwards time travel is impossible. You know, the grandfather paradox and various things like that. And travelling forward in time is quite easy comparatively. You just go very fast and you travel forward in time according to special relativity. You know, but if you going back in time should be impossible. But recent experiments on the double slit seem to indicate that there is at least information can go backwards in time, which could explain premonition. If the human brain is a quantum computer, but I'm getting ahead of myself there. And one of these scientists is called Roland Fuchs, and he's played by this chap. He's a black guy, this sort of old black guy, and he's been in loads of things. What's the name of the actor? I can't remember, but he's quite famous, and he's in this. So it's not completely B movie. And I mean, I don't want to denigrate things by calling them B movies, because that's kind of like, it's not a criticism to say something's a B movie. And he's very interesting because his wife tells him to go and see a grief counsellor because she thinks he's losing his head. And he says, "Yeah, I will." He goes and sees this physicist, and this is very interesting because he says that there's a simulation that if there's, for example, he says, supposing it's some kind of computer simulation we're in, which would be like the illusion. The universe is essentially a projection of some kind of higher being. Oops, sorry, my eyes are itching. Some kind of being, you might call it God if you want, is essentially creating the universe we see around us. He says that there are glitches occasionally in the program. In the Matrix, do you remember there was the cat? Neo sees the cat twice, and Trinity turns to him and says, "You saw that cat twice. That's a glitch in the Matrix. They're changing something." Maybe that's what actually happens, and then they start talking about, because Brendan starts talking about computer games, and he says, well, he talks about something called procedural generation, which is a term I never heard before, but apparently when it comes to designing, putting geometry into various computer games, so for example a virtual building or something, you wouldn't actually in order to save data and limit processing, you wouldn't actually have anything if the character is outside the building, the player character, and inside, you wouldn't actually model the inside of the building unless the player chooses to enter that building, and then there'll be another program, another set of programming for the interior of the building. But as long as the player doesn't do that, you wouldn't bother actually generating the interior of the building in virtual reality. There's no point. It's just wasted data, wasted processing, and this eventually leads to all that he starts saying the old things about if a tree falls down in the middle of the woods and there's no one there to hear it, does it make any sound? Which I think that's an old Japanese phrase. I don't know, but it's interesting because it's the kind of, whoever came up with that saying understands this sort of thing, which is that if the universe is dependent on us observing it, the nature of the universe, even its very presence, then that's saying something enormously significant about the nature of reality. And then they come up, this is where it gets very interesting, so it's very sci-fi, because Dr. Fuchs shows Roland the quantum computer. Now, the quantum computer thing is really interesting because they're actually designing one here in Oxford. They've got one in the university, and technically I could do what Brendan did in this. But he shows him this computer. It's this big black monolith-like structure. Interestingly, you have lots of monoliths in the news at the moment, and it's got these lights coming out of it, and it looks really sinister. It looks like Deep Thought from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the original TV series, not the stupid movie they made. And it's like, yeah, he says, yeah, this is it. This is the quantum computer. And he says, he says, well, hang on, we could write a program for this that could which could overload the actual whatever's going on with the universe, whatever program is making the universe, by exploiting the additional processing power that is left dormant due to procedural generation. And Roland says, well, I tried to do that, but I think the program stopped me. It's sort of, and it's weird and this is an interesting point. Wouldn't such a thing have the means to protect itself? I'll come to that again at the end. I'll come back to that in the end. So you couldn't do it on an average PC, but you see, a quantum computer, for example, I mean, I won't go into too much detail here because it's just such a big subject, but Kev Baker has done many programs about this when he has Nano Girl on and the various other guests, along with myself, of course. But he's very interested in quantum computers. Quantum computers, like I say, excuse me, which are being developed here in Oxford, are amazing, very interesting things, because each gate, each permutation of the electronics, it works by essentially exploiting the parallel universes. Now you see, it only works because of parallel universes, and as I said, because of the many worlds hypothesis this is where every single decision that happens, every single permutation of everything that happens in the universe. So my ear's itching now. Got my eyes, ears, what's next? My nose. Every single permutation of what happens in the universe is played out differently in another universe. And the classic one is the cat, the Schrodinger's cat. Is it dead or alive? But until you look, it could be both dead or alive. And then when you look, you go into one universe or the other. And every single thing that happens in the universe, that actually takes place. This is why I said at the beginning, it could be I've moved universes. I was in a universe where Looney Tunes was spelt T-O-O-N-S, and I've moved into one where it's spelt T-U-N-E-S. It's possible in a parallel universe they're having the same conversation the other way around, including a copy of myself. It's extraordinary. I mean, it was what's his name? Everett, the physicist. What's his name? Not Rupert Everett. Kenny Everett. I know lots of Everetts. Not Kenny Everett. Oh, I can't remember. Anyway, he said this. He talked about all this. He came up with this idea. So the quantum computer essentially takes advantage of that to do its calculations in multiple parallel universe. Now this is very interesting because it doesn't have to do them in a linear way the way normal computers do. Normal computers like the one I've got over there, it does everything in order. Now it can do it very fast. I mean, modern computers have like a central processing unit that can do these things enormously quickly. However, a quantum computer would be able to do these in parallel. All these calculations that are done in series on the normal computer could be done in parallel using all the other copies of itself in parallel universes. That's essentially what it how it works. And that essentially means every single operation a computer does could be done instantly. It gives it infinite processing power. I mean, I don't know exactly whether it is infinite or very large, but Professor or Dr. Fuchs, he shows his computer to Brendan. He says it's 512 qubits. That's Qubits. And I should have watched one of Kev's shows on this before I watched the Mandela Effect, and didn't, because I can't remember exactly what that means. It's interesting, like ideas. For example, it's not just like Oriental mythology that this concept comes about. I mean, there's a line in the Bible. It's in the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 17, verse 28. For in him we live and more. For in him we live and move and have our being, which indicates that him being God, essentially, rather than being God being up there on a cloud and looking down on us, God essentially is a name for the intelligence that creates the universe and operates the universe, including us who are within him. It's an interesting idea. And then, of course, the classic moment comes. I mean, everyone's been guessing where this is going. If you're the viewer, it's been hinted that's where you're going. He turns to Roland Fuchs and Brendan, and he says, and Fuchs says to him, what makes you think this is going to bring your daughter back anyway? So, of course, this is his idea. This is why, it's not been said before, but this is what Brendan's idea is. He wants us to see this as a way of resurrecting his child by changing the universe into one where she is alive rather than dead. Funnily enough, it was Everett, what's his name, Everett, who said when he died, he told his family to cremate him and then just throw the ashes out with the rubbish. It sounds a bit odd, but then the reason he did that was he says, well, don't worry, you know, because I'm going to be alive in another universe. Because he says, according to his model, you're effectively immortal, because every single cause, or possible, or even potential, or possible cause of your death doesn't take place in a parallel universe, which means you can't die in the entire multiverse. And then, so what happens is, it's interesting. Brendan starts writing a program on his computer at home, and you kind of know where he's going with this. He's going to try and hack reality using this quantum computer, and it seems that Dr. Fuchs is sort of like looking at him like that. But anyway, while he's doing this, almost, I mean, even he hasn't fiddled with the quantum computer yet, but weird things start happening all around him. He starts seeing the ghost of his daughter. And I say ghost because it is like a ghostly encounter. One sec. Oops. Oh dear, what was that? Oh, hang on. Nothing serious, I don't think. No. Oh, it's alright. Sorry about that. He starts seeing the ghost of his daughter. And I say ghost, maybe... Could it be that this is actually what ghosts are? Or at least some of them. And there are implications for paranormal research when it comes to this sort of thing. And he becomes more interested and more interested. He starts having these visions where he is in another universe where his daughter's alive, and slowly but surely these visions start becoming more prevalent to the point where you can't work out what's real and what's fake. It starts off with him having dreams about his daughter and seeing his daughter's ghost, and Claire gets up and says, oh, don't be silly, she's not here, she's gone, I'm sorry, she's gone. But then it keeps carrying on until eventually he's living completely in this world, which you think is a dream, and it turns out it's not. where she's alive. And then, and he's funny. He listens to Art Bell as well. There's a scene in the film where he listens to Art Bell. It's really interesting because there's another weird thing as well. This film was made in 2018, and when he's driving along listening to Art Bell, and then the news comes on, and it talks about election irregularities. Well, that was in 2018. I mean, what are we going through now? Election. We're going through that now, aren't we? Could that be backwards information transferring to the filmmakers from 2 years in the future? I wonder. Oh, there's another little Mandela effect. There's another little popular Mandela effect little skit they put in there, because his alarm clock goes off and he wakes up like that, and he looks at the clock and it's 10:25 AM. Well, of course, if you study the Mandela effect, you'll know that there's this. One of the Mandela effects is that the clock at Bologna Station stopped when the bomb went off in 1980. In 1980, there was a bomb went off. It was blamed on terrorists. It turns out it was actually like Operation Gladio, a state-run or false flag, a 9/11 type thing. But the point is that people remember that the clock stopped and never started again. However, the fact is the clock did keep going, and it's still running today. I mean, it was stopped. It was actually stopped for a memorial on the 40th anniversary just recently, and this is where this all came out. But however, the point is that people said that clock was just left stopped the whole time as a kind of memorial to the people who died. I think there was like 180 odd people who died in that bomb. That's in Italy, the railway station, and the number of people say no, even local people say no, that clock's never run again, and they look and they, hang on, it's going. That's another Mandela effect, and that's there as well. Brendan, then it's revealed, and of course Brendan plans to hack reality using this quantum computer. And you know something weird's going on, and there's more and more hints, because, for example, now he's living in this world, this sort of like world where Sam is alive. The TV, Looney Tunes comes on the TV, and it's Looney Tunes. It's like earlier when he's reading Berenstain Bears. It's like he flips into different universes, then it's Berenstain Bears. It's really interesting, actually, because this does have a lot in common with other films. I think the Mandela effect is similar to many other films. For example, there's a good film called Jacob's Ladder, which is about a man. It's a very good film, that, about a man who he's just living a normal life, but he starts experiencing really weird things, like seeing these monsters chasing him around everywhere. And as the film progresses, things get weirder and weirder and weirder. Then it turns out that he essentially is having a prolonged near-death experience, and that you find out later that sorry about the spoilers again, but you find out later that he died, and that everything he's been experiencing is like imaginary. It's a great movie, actually, a really great movie. It's also very similar to a film called Don't Look Now. This is an older film with Julie Christie and Donald Sutherland. They play a couple who lose their child, and a lot of what they go through is similar to what Brendan and Claire go through, and also it has this element that he also is like Brendan, Donald Sutherland's character, because he believes no, sorry, it's the other way around. Sorry, the mother, starts to become very open to the idea that their daughter is trying to communicate with them through a medium. And there's these two old ladies who are like psychic, and they say, oh, your daughter wants to speak to you. And it's actually the husband who tries to supposedly bring his wife back to reality and saying, she's gone, she's dead, I'm sorry, but she's gone. And then in the end it becomes very obvious that there is a real ghost. It's a good film, that Don't Look Now. There's also a film called Tree of Life, which came out a couple of years ago, and that's very good. That's worth seeing. It really is. But you know something weird. You know that Claire, you see, starts to act weirdly because she has some kind of awareness of the other universe as well, where Sam's died, because she starts to act strangely, and she stares at her daughter at one point and says, "You shouldn't be here." And Matt and Brendan try to look after her, but then there's a little bit of a shock because Brendan goes to see Dr. Fuchs and finds out that he died, and in this universe he's dead. So he has to try and break into the. He has to break into the university where there's this quantum computer, and there's this rather obnoxious man there who won't let him go in. He's in the first time because this is the guy who took over the project from Dr. Fuchs and runs the quantum computer, and it's pretty good. So what happens? What happens is, as I said, there's going to be spoilers. Brendan manages to get into the quantum computer. He's got his program on like a memory stick. He just plugs it in because the computer has a quite normal interface terminal, you know, just a monitor, keyboard and stuff like this quantum computer. And he programs the quantum computer with what he's written. And he says it's using essentially a very, very similar language and things like that to his own works. He finds it quite easy to adapt his own coding to what the quantum computer uses, and once it's in there and it starts doing these quantum permutations and these calculations, it manages to kind of override whatever is causing, whatever is creating this reality simulation. And then it's really good. It gets really good at the end because he's like going home and all from the university, and weird things start to happen. Like there's this lady on the bus and she's standing there to leave the bus, and then she starts sort of like walking down, like she's walking downstairs, but she starts walking into the floor of the bus and disappears. And there's this like smooching couple a few seats behind, and they're sort of kissing one moment and their faces start merging. It's really like weird, creepy. And this reminds me, there's a book actually, I was going to try and find my copy of it. I can't find my copy of it, but it's a very interesting science fiction book. It was given to me as a present by a friend, gave me it as a present actually. It's called Light, and it's by M. John Harrison, and it's like that. It's a bit similar to that. It's about a man who manages to find, a scientist, he manages to find a way to do that sort of thing, and all kinds of weird things happened. It's a difficult book to read actually. It's complicated, very jargon heavy, but it's worth reading. It really is. And then the weird thing is, you go back to it all sort of like, it's like reality breaks down. There's this amazing sequence of shots where everything is going nuts, everything's going crazy, and you know, there's like there's planets colliding in the sky and everything's disappearing. It's like that thing I talked about in my CERN video about the Mofi battery ad. Do you remember I talked about the Mofi battery ad, where God, who ironically is I think he's played by the same actor actually, who plays Dr. Fuchs. I'm sure it's someone who looks very like him. Has like his mobile phone, he's directing reality with his mobile phone, and then the battery goes flat because he's not using a Mofi battery. This was just like a Super Bowl ad, and it results in this really surreal apocalypse. I couldn't remember all the details. Do check out my video. I'll put a link in the description box actually to my video on CERN, because you'll like that, because I did a whole video on CERN, the Large Hadron Collider. And it's visually it's a very good movie. It's obviously like like I say, it's a modest production. Doesn't have really major media mega-star kind of actors and actresses. I didn't recognise, the only actor I recognised was the guy playing Fuchs, and I didn't know his name. I just sort of looked at him and thought, he looks a bit like, is that Morgan Freeman? No, it's somebody else. It turns out but then I looked up his name and I saw where I'd seen him before. Ironically, he plays Nelson Mandela in this Endgame movie, which I remember seeing. It's a drama about Nelson Mandela, which is interesting. Now he's in the Mandela Effect. And well, I'm not going to spoil the very last scene for you, but it sort of like settles down. It ends in sort of like settled kind of way. You think, what's happening now? And then you go, ah, right. Interestingly, the little girl there's this George the Monkey cartoon book, and at the beginning, in the first scene with the daughter, the monkey has a tail, and the second scene doesn't have a tail. That's another Mandela effect. I don't know if that's actually just part of the story, or whether there is a George the Monkey cartoon. I don't know. If there is, it's probably been banned for racism anyway. So, yeah, it's interesting. Now, there are some questions though about this. if we are living in some kind of simulated universe, the universe obviously, it doesn't mind, or God, or whatever the spirit of the universe is that is behind the whole thing, obviously does not mind the fact that we can perceive it and conceptualize the simulation. So there's nothing in it, because obviously we are within this universe, but we are sentient. We're not computer programs. We're sentient beings. We have self-awareness. We have consciousness. That's the one certainty philosophically that we know of, is I think therefore I am. So we're not just creations of the simulation. If some being wanted to create a simulated universe, it wouldn't need to do. All it would need is like non-player characters, which some people say some people are. I mean, I don't know, but it wouldn't need like sentient beings within it. It could create just simulation of sentient beings. However, it doesn't. It's put in beings which have the ability to think independently. Some of us, anyway. And we have the ability to say, hang on a minute, is this real? That, in a sense, could be used as an argument against the simulation hypothesis, because you could say, well, if it was a simulation, the various programs within it, which would be people or other beings with a consciousness, would not have that ability to conceptualize the fact they were in a simulation. And the fact that we can even ask that question, means that what we have around us must be real. It's an interesting question. I mean, it's too big a subject for one video, but it's an interesting point, isn't it? Maybe you can put your thoughts in the comments boxes, and then I'll go into them, possibly go into them later on when I do the comments reply videos. It's a difficult question to answer, but like I said, this is a very old idea which has been confirmed by modern science. I mean, even I don't know about Professor Brian Cox. I mean, he's probably too obnoxiously dense to know anything about this or even think about it. But I know lots of scientists are talking about parallel universes. A lot of them are saying, well, actually, maybe there's more than one universe. In fact, it's almost like, I think it's now mainstream. Yeah, I mean, literally, the scientists are. They are. It's not fair, really. This always happens. The scientists and the cosmologists spend their whole careers for centuries and centuries mocking the mystics and pagans and spiritualists and Buddhists and things like that, and then they come up with it. Then they admit that all along, essentially, that all these people they've been mocking were right, but then they don't actually apologise. They just say, "Ah, it's a new idea. We thought of it first." I don't think you'll ever find a way to get around that. That's all. That's what people are always going to do, unfortunately. Oh, but wow, it's a mind-blowing film. Like I said, I'm still. It's one of those films I can't process all at once. Maybe I need a quantum computer inside my head. But then it's possible. You know Roger Penrose? He's a very open-minded kind of scientific guy. He has done several interviews saying he believes that the human brain is a quantum computer. It actually is. I mean, I wish I don't have all the details, but he appears in one of these documentaries that I like watching. These like I think it's one of the David Malone ones. You know, like there's Testing God, and there's the Secret Self, and then Dangerous Knowledge. I can't remember which one it was, but Roger Penrose appears in at least one of them talking about this. And Stuart Hameroff as well is in it. There's actually some clips in the Mandela Effect of these various people. I think there's Dean Radin or one of the others who appears in What the Bleep Do We Know about this sort of thing. It's worth watching What the Bleep Do We Know, actually, because I know it was made by the Ramtha School of Enlightenment people, but it's really, really interesting. It's really worth reading. It's really, really very worth watching, because it's like a documentary that goes into all this. I think if you watch What the Bleep Do We Know, the documentary, it's only an hour and 40 minutes, and then watch the Mandela Effect, which is an hour and 20 minutes, you'll get a lot more out of it than if you just watch the Mandela Effect, I think. So that's my own first impressions after watching this film. But let's see what the critics have to say. Okay, guys and gals, let's see what the critics have to say. Well, there are actually not many reviews of this particular film, probably because it was a limited release movie. So even before the lockdown, it didn't get many plays on big screen locations. However, look, go to Rotten Tomatoes, you can see there's no critics consensus listed. However, we have a tomatometer score of 20%. That's the critics, and then a 77% audience score. Now, obviously, like you said, total count 5, user ratings 115. I don't know if that makes like a difference, but if this is like a proper statistical score, then what you have here is another case of the audience defying the critics. And I absolutely loathe that phrase, defying the critics. It's a horrible cliche, because it implies that the critics have some kind of authority over other people's tastes, which they don't. They just think they do. But it could be that, like with some films, it's something that the critics, for what they're worth, really dislike and write scathing reviews of, and that the audience people, that is non-critics, nice people, decent people, people who have a bit more modesty and a bit more sort of what's the word? Less arrogance, less of that Professor Brian Cox swagger, which critics seem to have. They most of them do like it, and I think that just shows how much of a gap there is, how divorced the intellectual authorities are from ordinary people. And I'm going to go on. I don't want to preach, but you know what I mean. So that's not bad. It appears to be reasonably popular with the audience. That's the main thing. And so now let's go over to the Hollywood Reporter. No, I can't find anything in the Guardian, so I can't do my Guardian voice. You're not going to be allowed to have that again, unfortunately. But it says here, how does the Hollywood Reporter talk? I don't know. Maybe like this. Maybe like these really, really over-the-top, exuberant film critics. These film reporters. The Mandela Effect Film Review. A grieving father explores the phenomena of false shared memories after the death of his young daughter in David Guy Levy's sci-fi thriller. At another point or another, we've fallen victim to the Mandela Effect. Even former President George W. Bush, who famously declared Nelson Mandela to be dead when the former South African leader was still very much alive. Thing is, George W. Bush probably couldn't even work out who was dead or alive, including himself. He was so thick. So I don't really put much proportion in that. Referring to false memories shared by large numbers of people, the Mandela Effect has now inspired the new sci-fi thriller, directed and co-written by David Guy Levy. Unfortunately, while the Mandela Effect is a fascinating phenomenon, well, that's something anyway, the Mandela Effect film proves less than successful in its exploitation of it. Right, I see. Okay, but anyway, he goes on to give the basics of the whole thing. The basics of the Mandela Effect thing. Let's have a look. Okay, we've got another one here, another paragraph of that, another paragraph of that. Okay, so most of this review is simply explaining what the Mandela Effect is, but then in the bottom of the review they say this: infused with enough deadening scientific jargon to lull a graduate student to sleep. Oh well, I suppose it was slightly technical, I suppose, but I mean, it didn't put me off, and I'm not a graduate student in anything apart from life. The film, which feels much longer than its brief 80-minute running time, never succeeds in effectively dramatising its outlandish premise. The plot twists, including one would-be doozy towards the end, are neither credible nor compelling. The special effects are unconvincing, and the lead performers prove unable to fully sell the outlandish material. The filmmaker should hope someday that in the future enough viewers will sufficiently suffer from the Mandela Effect to falsely remember that this was a better film. Oh yes, very droll, very droll. I don't know, I mean, how could it have been better in terms of the special effects? On the technical side, I thought it was very good. I didn't think they were unconvincing. I mean, they were probably, considering what was being depicted, they were probably about as convincing as it could be, or unless someone could do a better job, I don't know. And the acting wasn't, but I thought the acting was pretty good. I don't know.
I don't know. But anyway, interesting. That's one of the few reviews we've got of this particular film. Okay, there are no more reviews of the film. However, I do want to go onto this little page here, and this is something from Healthline.com. It's not a film review. It's just it's like basically an online medical advice service. It is by Dr. Timothy J. Legg, PhD, CNRP, about the Mandela effect, so what it is. And it just says here, the Mandela effect, how false memories occur. Excuse me. Excuse me. So, it says here, the Mandela effect occurs when a large group of people believe an event occurred when it did not. There are many examples of the Mandela effect in popular culture, and this article will explore why and how these false memories occur. And it just goes, it goes into several paragraphs here, just simply explaining what that is. It gives a few examples as well, and then it talks about confabulation. It's interesting it mentions confabulation because I brought that up at the beginning. But it says here, the symptoms of the Mandela effect include remembering something as slightly different in wording or appearance as it originally was, or a large number of people recounting the same way of remembering. Well, essentially, I think that disproves the whole idea of conflation, really, doesn't it? One way to think of the Mandela effect on your memory is to consider the way you record information like the childhood game of telephone. During this game, an initial statement is spoken and whispered to one person, and then the next, and the next, until the message is delivered to the final person. Usually in the telephone game, the final message would be slightly different because people heard or remembered it slightly differently. This is true for your memory. You may pull a memory from your brain, but time and infrequent recall can cause you to put the memory back in a slightly different way. Well, that's true. That is what conflation is, but that's not what the Mandela effect is. The Mandela effect is something different. If you get like 1 million people all over the world to get with their friends and play a game of telephone, they're not all going to come up with the same answer, are they? They're going to come up with multiple different answers because they're completely randomized kind of permutations, because you're dealing with a whole string of people who basically alter the message in different ways. And it says here, how do you recognize a false memory? It's really difficult, and usually the only way we know your memory is false is to corroborate your story with other people or research. If you remember a saying a certain way, you can look it up from reliable sites and confirm it with others. Yes, you can. However, again, that doesn't necessarily confirm that it was real, because in the case of the Mandela effect, there's millions of people all over the world who back you up on what you later find out from other sources is false. It says here, fortunately, when it comes to the Mandela effect, most false memories seem to be harmless. Replacing an A in Berenstein with an E usually only harms your pride in remembering small details. It says here, the bottom line. The Mandela effect is an unusual phenomenon when a large group of people remember something differently than how it occurred. Well, it doesn't add. It should have added onto this sentence in the same way, and it doesn't. So that sentence could merely apply to normal false memories, normal conflation. So that's not the bottom line at all, isn't it? Oh, and this is the last sentence. This is a doozy. To use that word. Conspiracy theorists believe this is proof of an alternate universe, while many doctors use it as an illustration of how imperfect memory can sometimes be. Conspiracy theorists believe this is proof of an alternate universe. Don't listen to those nasty, horrible loonies like that bald taffy Ben Emlyn Jones. No. I think a Steve Mumbling impression is coming up, yes. It's a steaming pile. Absolute rubbish.
And so that was the critics. Interesting. So what happens next? Well, there's going to be... well, it depends on whether the universe breaks down or not, but who knows? It's interesting. It's a bit like what Terence McKenna calls about when he talks about novelty, isn't it? Because we are going through a very novelty-like situation at the moment. It's very novel. Everything's very novel. Trump being the US president, Brexit happening. It's all very novel. But on those subjects, if we can get back down to reality, but maybe back down to the samsara, the simulation, The simulation at the moment is very interesting. We've got a no-deal Brexit coming up, but probably, and we have, well, I think it's reaching showdown with the whole election thing. So keep an eye out on the channel, because there'll be some. I'll be putting some updates for that. Now, if you listen to Hapanwo Radio as well as watch Hapanwo TV, next Thursday I'm doing a special show on Hapanwo Radio, not TV, Hapanwo Radio, about the election. It's an update, so check that out. Hopefully I'll be able to do a live stream on the Brexit election situation as well sometime this coming week, but it could be that I just won't have time. But if I don't, I'll just do one as soon as possible after that. But I also have to I have to get in another comment reply video before Christmas. So there's only one of me, unfortunately, unless I can get some help from one of my parallel selves in other universes. Hey guys, can you do some of this work for me, please? But as for you, whichever universe you happen to be in while you're watching this, whether you're a Looney Tunes guy or a Looney Tunes guy, whether Mandela died in 1986 or 2013, according to you, thank you very, very much for watching this video. Thank you very, very much for watching Hapanwo TV yet again. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order.